Okay, so welcome back, y'all. As you probably guessed from the title, today I'm going to be talking about some 5.56 rifle options, different platforms and whatnot. Some of these are going to be harder to come by now than they used to be, but they are out there. They were built, they were imported, whatever. And if you see one, maybe it might help you decide. So, of course, like I've mentioned recently, you have the SIG 550 series, whether it be this, like the 5.56 version, or the original Swiss styles, the 550s, kind of an AK and an AR baby. You have the SIG MCX, which is kind of an AR and an AR 180 baby. Modern times, known as the M13 Modern Warfare. Very modern gun. You have 5.56 calibered AKs. And you, of course, have the original gun that the caliber was designed for, the AR-15. So, for the most part, everything's compared to the AR-15. So, what are the opinions? What are my opinions? Spoiler alert. Actually, no spoiler. It's obvious, but whatever. 5.56. So if you see this in your gun store, the Swiss versions, they're awesome. I mean, they're awesome guns. But if you're looking to buy one, well, first off, they're several $1,000s, so they're a collector's gun anyway. You get that precious factor that I've talked about with like the Scar and some of the other guns. But also, even if you can't afford them, find magazines for them. Good luck, because on eBay they're like $150 plus or so, and they just aren't imported enough. If you talk about these ones that use AR mags, well, it's a long stroke gas piston AR. That essentially looks like it operates kind of like an AK. Parts availability is not nearly as prevalent, so if parts do break or you need to replace wear items, you're going to be hard pressed to find them. But generally speaking, it should last you more than most people would ever shoot. So I wouldn't necessarily count one of these out. They're very well built guns in my opinion. They were built at a time when SIG had a bad reputation, but most people that actually have these actually like them. Going on to the MCX, a more modern version of SIG's endeavors. Very cool gun, very modern looking gun. Video game gun, kind of like the Scar. Very forward thinking gun. But again, the downside to them is getting parts. And when you can find parts available for these, they are ridiculously expensive compared to, say, AR parts. Like I said in the previous video, this is an SBR, but if you got the pistol version of a Virtus, they're very, like you could take this anywhere type of thing. But if parts wear, parts breakage, you're going to spend more money if you can even get them. And how long, we don't know how long this will actually be a prevalent gun. SIG might decide to quit making them at some point. And then, just like they did the 5.56 series rifles, and then you're up shit's creek without a paddle. So, cool gun. They did a lot of unique stuff with this that probably will be, even if they quit making the MCX, I think a lot of stuff will be copied for years to come. A lot of things have already been copied, like the Picatinny section on the back of the receivers for stock mounting options. That was really ingenious on their part. AKs have been doing it now for the past few years since then. But anyway, so awesome gun if you can get one. But most of the time, if you're going to find a Virtus, in stock, it's going to be like a short Rattler version, most likely in 5.56, which is pointless. If you watch my 5.56 video about barrel selection, that's just pointless. Or it's going to be like a 16-inch long boy in 300 blackout, which is, again, for that caliber, is pointless. Finding those Goldilocks guns, like finding a Virtus like this at 11.5 inch in a pistol is going to be next to impossible, and you're going to pay a pretty penny for it. So something to think about. You got to kind of know you want an MCX to buy an MCX. It's kind of like knowing you want a SCAR. So comparing that to the AKs. Love my AKs. Like I said, this gun, I don't even know how many rounds I've got through this gun. It just keeps running. I got lucky. Some of these arsenals were known for having a lot of issues early on. I got a good one. And my NATO AK is, an even newer one, so it's, got the better gassing and whatnot. But Arsenal, they don't import these anymore. This is Sava has, they have the whichever 5.56 caliber rifles they have, the 90 or whatever. Those have their own issues, with stuff. They're Serbian-made guns. They're not as good, just plain as day. But there are other options out there that, most of your AKs, however, that are quality, are no longer being made. They're not imported. Chinese, Russian, Bulgarian. Those are the top three. It really doesn't matter which one you pick over those, but those are the top three countries of import that you want to buy an AK from. Remaining two, they're just not as fancy. The Polish barrels, I'm sure they're probably okay if they're made okay. And then they use the same exact magazines as the arsenals. But honestly, that would probably be the go-to for a new one nowadays, is getting one of those. The barrel, however you want to say it, it's beryllium shortened, so I would say barrel, whatever. The Polish military used that rifle design since the 90s, and worked great. I remember being in Iraq and seeing when we went to Babylon, the Poles ran that area, and they had those 5.56 AKs. So yeah, like I said before, the magazines are not as prevalent. They're more expensive. Probably the cheapest version of the magazine to get that's worth anything would be these clear Polish barrel V Project mags. They're not reinforced at all, but I've actually, with this, whatever they're made out of, I haven't had any problem with lugs, the locking lugs breaking or the feed lips cracking. They're pretty good if you can get them still. And Polish imports haven't been banned yet, so that's cool. I do like AKs. They're not as ergonomic as any of the other guns as far as manipulation. You got rock and lock mags versus trade insert of all the other ones I've shown, and the safety is typically one-sided, and you have to remove your firing grip to do it. That's not as big of an issue as I think a lot of people make it out to be, because honestly, if you're unsafe, what's the difference? It's not really a big time penalty for running an AK safety. Reloads are slower, like I've said in the previous video, because you have to rock out your old mag at some point, lock in the new one, and if you ran dry, you have to run your charging handle. But will put it at someone much more experienced than me when it comes to shooting. I said, when's the, most people have never even done a combat reload that actually shoot, that actually have done things. It's something that's way overhyped. I'm not just talking about like self-defense shootings or whatever, where that like talk about how many rounds are statistically fired. I'm talking about in combat is how many times have people actually had to do an emergency reload while being engaged or engaging it without, like some lull or some cover. It's just, I do think it's an overhyped thing, at which point, makes the AK make more sense because it's a much more sturdy locking mechanism. As far as if you watched Flannel Daddy's ice test video, pretty much anything with an AR style magazine didn't really work out so well. That's not like the only situation. I mean, there's plenty of situations you could put an AK in and it would fail, but that's just one thing I like about them. So comparing it to all the AR, in this country, the AR is king. I think it always will be. There's a reason why the military, pretty much throughout the entire GWAT kept saying they were going to replace the AR with something, and they never did. And here we are in 2022, they're talking about replacing it again, and I honestly think we still won't. That it's just a proven platform. They got all the kinks worked out of it, and it's everything that it needs to be. We're talking about ergonomic improvements over the years. There's really been not a whole lot. It's kind of like a 1911 in a way that, all the fancy attachments have changed, but the guts of the gun haven't changed a whole lot. Yeah, there's been a few small tweaks like M4 feed ramps, the O-ring on the extractor type stuff, different buffer weights and things like that functionally help. But a lot of, for the most part, an AR from the 60s is essentially functionally the same as an AR from today. If you took a AR from the 60s and replaced it with all modern stuff from an AR today, it would just go right in and work. So there's something to be said about that. You can take a Vietnam era mag, slap it in, and make it work. It probably would jam because those mags sucked. But the same could be said if you took a 60s era AR-15 through a new, like one of these mags or, whatever into it, the gun would function. That's why it's kind of the most prevalent fighting rifle there is in the country. And it probably always will be, because for the last, since the 60s, so almost 60 something years ago when they came out, Eugene Stoner, they had a good idea. There's one time the good idea fairy kind of worked out, but the AR, I think, is not going anywhere. There are other options to be unique. I have a lot of options. There's even more options out there, but at the end of the day, when it comes to, especially with 5.56, I think, you're just going to be hard pressed to beat an AR in the appropriate barrel length and whatever for your needs. They just work. No one really needs a folding stock that works while you're firing. To me, that's pretty gimmicky. The ergonomics of the AR are just unmatched. They've been tried to copy. It's kind of like the trigger on a 1911. Everybody tries to copy that, but you can't ever quite get there. Ergonomics on an AR are pretty much unmatched, and they are the one that is imitated. So, I think that if I had to pick a 5.56 gun, starting from scratch, if I say I lost all my guns in a boating accident and had to get a new one, for one, for availability, for parts availability, magazine availability, cost. That's another thing. Is ARs are way cheaper to build here than any of the other guns. I would pick an AR, just like a setup, and go from there. I wouldn't honestly mess with any of the others. If I had to start from scratch, I'd just get an AR and the barrel length I need and go to town. So at the end of the day, they're just tools. You're the weapon. So just remember that. If you have any comments, make sure to drop them down below, and like, share, and subscribe, and I'll be back.